The Penguins are set to take on the Florida Panthers for the third and final time on Wednesday night. And on today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast, we're going to preview that game, plus go into Warrior Helmet Wednesday.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at Synonym for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So before we preview this game against the Florida Panthers, and these two teams have played two really good games against one another earlier this season, the Penguins lineup, as we teased during the Tuesday episode, it is going to look a little bit different. They are going to go 11 forwards and 7 defensemen tonight. And as I said on Tuesday, I hate it. It's clunky. It's uncomfortable. It's just honestly not that much fun, to be honest. And the reason why they're going 11-7, A, they don't have enough salary cap space for recall, and B, they're not putting one of Achari or Jansen Harkins on long-term IR. So they just don't have the room to call up anyone else. And what that means for the Penguins lines, Jake Gensel, Sidney Crosby, Brian Russ on the top line, Riley Smith with Evgeny Malkin, Jesse Puljujarvi, Rickard Rakell with Lars Eller and Drew O'Connor, and then Colin White and Jeff Carter as the 2/3 of the fourth line, if you want to call it that. And then they have all 7 defensemen playing in this one. Pat, what are your overall thoughts about them going 11-7? I know we discussed it a little bit on Tuesday, but again, I still think it's just a bit clunky. It's kind of annoying. And I know it's only going to be for a couple games, but it still kind of gives me the ick.
It's just unfortunately a necessary evil for tonight's game and maybe tomorrow's, just because of the injury situation and the salary cap situation that the Penguins are facing right now. I will say I am going to echo what I said yesterday in that putting an 11-7 lineup out there actually is probably going to force this team to play a much more simple game, a much more responsible game. And when you go up against a team like the Florida Panthers, that's the kind of game you have to play. And I also, as much as I'm with you, I don't like an 11-7 lineup just because it throws a lot of things in flux. It causes some guys who might not need increased ice time to get increased ice time simply because of the way you've set the lineup. I will say, though, they have played some of their best hockey this season against the Florida Panthers in just the way they've played overall. They've been solid in all 3 zones. They have played responsible hockey defensively and not given Florida a whole lot because they do have a sneakily good offensive attack. And the biggest thing for me, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in the preview, they don't back down from the fight against a team full of villains. This is a team that is going to try to goad you into taking penalties and agitate you, and they walk right up to the line, but never cross it against Florida. And I want to see more of that tonight.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought that second meeting against the Panthers was probably one of the most fun games of the season. Even though the Penguins didn't win, there were chances galore on both ends. It was nasty. I think that's the nastiest game the Penguins have played all year. I know there's fans out there saying, oh, this team is soft, they're not tough enough and all that good stuff. But in my opinion, I thought the Penguins were pretty tough in that game. They were throwing the body like it was nothing. They were responding to what Sam Bennett was doing just because he was playing really dirty, I felt like, in that game, especially with his cross-check on Chris Letang. I believe that was in the second period of that game. And they were going toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the conference. You had Jeff Carter pissing off Matthew Tkachuk, not once, but multiple times in that game. And I think a lot of this is going to carry over into this game. The Penguins are going to have to make sure that they, A, keep their composure, and B, respond diligently to when the Panthers try to maybe get this game a little out of hand, just because they did it in the last matchup. They did a little bit in the first matchup, but not as much in the second one. That's one of the things I'm looking for from the Penguins in this one. outside of, winning the game and taking the 2 points, which is the most important thing considering where this team is in the standings.
And back to the 11-7 lineup, I also think it's going to force a lot of players to have to be at their best, because out of necessity, when you run an 11-7 lineup, everybody gets put on notice. And if you're not playing a good brand of hockey in an 11-7 lineup, you will get stapled to the bench. And I know that a lot of people don't think that's Mike Sullivan's style per se, but if the 2 extra forwards or the 1 extra defenseman that he deems might not be playing well, you might see him just roll 3 lines and then roll 2 pairings, or maybe 3 pairings with 1 defenseman sitting on the bench. So it is kind of a feast or famine lineup, just for the fact that your night could end very early if you're not playing well.
And another thing that at least is maybe decent about this, you get to see some new combinations, whether it's the forwards or whether it's the defensemen. And I think especially for the defensemen, when you have all 7 of these guys playing, you can see maybe what the better combination is for at least a game between John Ludvig and POJ with Chad Ruhwedel, because I think both of them are going to get time with Ruhwedel. Maybe you see one of them get bumped up to the top 4. For example, if Ryan Graves struggles a little bit with Erik Karlsson, but you get to see some experimenting with the line combinations at forward and defense. And maybe that could turn into something after the Penguins get some guys back and they're able to go 12 forwards and 6 defensemen in other games.
Yeah, I agree. And like you kind of were hinting there, like this could also be a creative couple of days for the coaching staff to mess with the lines, to mess with the defensive pairings. And where this team sits right now, that's not the worst idea, because look where they are. They're still 7 points out of the playoffs. They've only had 1 extended winning streak this year. What they're doing is not leading to success, at least not extended success. So at this point, if a line's not working, he doesn't have to hesitate to put it in the blender. If a defensive pairing is getting caved in again, he can move guys up and down. So overall, while I don't like going with an 11-7 lineup, with where this team is at the present moment, it might not be the worst thing, because it's going to lead to experimentation, hopefully with the lines and defensive pairings. And again, I do really believe that when you go 11-7, everybody has to be at their top level or close to it, because you can get your night ended very early by the coaching staff if you're not playing well, because you have this clunky lineup with guys unavailable due to injury. So there is nowhere to hide for anybody that's playing tonight.
And that's why I think for someone like Rickard Rakell, who has really struggled this year, if his struggles continue tonight, I honestly would not be surprised if Mike Sullivan did, as you're suggesting, end his night early and then kind of play with 10 forwards. I know that's not the best situation because you're playing another forward down, but if his struggles continue, I wouldn't be surprised if he shortens his bench at least a little bit, just because he hasn't been that good this season. But we'll have to see what happens. That's the lineup for tonight. Coming up in the second segment, Pat and I are going to go into a full preview for this game and how the Penguins can walk away with 2 massive points in the standings. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. You can also buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Penguins-Panthers for the third and final time. The last meeting ended in a shootout loss for the Penguins after a wild back-and-forth affair. The Penguins scored on the 6-on-5 late in the third period to at least get a point. What a goal it was from Evgeny Malkin. The celebration that he had was awesome. Then you had overtime where the Penguins were just kind of just wanting the game to get to a shootout considering their struggles in 3-on-3 this year.
Both
and
teams,
then the shootout, what'd you say?
Both teams, but we beat that horse to death last time we talked about this game.
We did. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. The Panthers had the better of the chances, but I mean, that's expected when the Penguins just did not have the puck at all in overtime. Then the Penguins lose in the shootout, but this is going to be a really fun game again. The Panthers, they come into this game 70 points, 4 points out of first in the Atlantic Division. They've won 6 of their last 10, only 2 regulation losses in that time as well. And they've also won 2 games in a row. You all know how great their top players have been this season. Sam Reinhart, I think, has been their best player. 39 goals in 52 games. That is an insane pace, man. 39 and 52. He has been unbelievable, especially on the power play. You all know what you're going to get from Matthew Tkachuk. Carter Verhaeghe has been great. Sasha Barkov should win the Selke. Evan Rodriguez has been a really good depth piece. He actually scored in that last game against the Penguins as well. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who I did not think much of heading into the season. He's actually had a pretty decent year for the Panthers for their defensive group. But for you, Pat, how do the Penguins get 2 big points in the standings?
They have to play discipline tonight. I mean, we're in an era again of NHL hockey where the big guns are going to get their cookies, they're going to get their points, and you have to go in expecting that. So for tonight, more than anything, the offense on the Penguins side has to wake up tonight. There has to be a conceited effort to push for offense. Now, that doesn't mean playing reckless and playing careless and selling out the defensive zone, because as you talked about, this is a very talented Florida team. I mean, the names you brought up, Reinhart, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe, Barkov, they all have more than 50 points this year. Sam Reinhart with 64 and almost 40 goals at this point is absurdity. So this team can score, and it's a very balanced lineup because they have, let me make sure I got my numbers here right, because as our Locked On fans know, not a math guy, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players with 10 or more goals. So this team scores and they get it from everywhere. And we're not seeing the off-year Sergei Bobrovsky either. So you are going to have to push in the offensive zone tonight, because not only can this team score, they can get saves. And for that, and everybody's going to laugh at me and everybody's going to say, oh, here he goes again. But you know who my player to watch tonight is?
Don't say it.
Jeff Carter. And not just because he got into all the scrums and everything against a team like Florida. He eats the Florida Panthers alive in his career. 43 games, 16 goals, 21 assists, 37 points, +9. And those 37 points are third most against any team in his career. So he loves playing this team. And with the lineup we spent the first segment talking about, he is going to need to step up tonight as a depth piece.
I figured I knew where you were going with that, even though I didn't want you to say it. But hey, maybe he does have another at least fun game against the Panthers, considering how fun he was to watch in that last game against them.
And much similar to how, how hard Sidney Crosby works, and everybody's, we talk about how, Sid sets the tone. He's one of the greatest players of all time, and yet he still works his butt off at all times. What Jeff Carter did against Florida, getting into scrums, getting into the physical play, playing a hard game, that sends a message to the rest of the team. This guy's pushing 40 and he's still out there doing all this. So what is my excuse? So everybody, top to bottom tonight, has to bring it.
I agree. And this is a game, even though the Penguins are down or forward in this one, I still want to see a semblance of depth scoring. Hey, it'd be nice if Riley Smith wants to maybe wake up a little bit more after scoring in Minnesota. That was a nice goal, but again, I feel like a lot of it was because of a brilliant pass from Evgeny Malkin. It'd be nice to see him get on the score sheet. I know I've trashed Rickard Rakell a lot this week, but hey, maybe it'd be nice if he scored in this game as well, so that Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel and Evgeny Malkin don't have to do everything on a nightly basis. More so, the former two, Gino has been a bit more inconsistent compared to those two this season, but I still think he's been one of the best players. But it feels like when one of those three, especially those first two, aren't doing anything, the Penguins are not going anywhere in games. Speaking of Jake Gensel, he has also ate the Panthers alive throughout his career. 7 goals and 11 points in his last 9 games against them. He always shows up to play the Florida Panthers. Another big key for me, and honestly, this is a key I feel like for every Penguins game this season, Tristan Jarry. He has played really well against the Panthers throughout his career, and he is continuing to have one heck of a season for the Penguins. He's top 10 in goals saved above expected, but he's going up against a goalie who is also having one heck of a year in Sergei Bobrovsky. He's 11th in goals saved above expected with 10, .913 save percentage, 2.43 goals against average. This is a heavyweight goaltending battle, and it's one that Jarry has to win. If this team has any chance of winning in this one, they're going to need really strong play from their number one netminder. Nedeljkovic started in that last game against the Panthers, and he was tremendous in that game. And Jarry is going to have to replicate that if the Penguins want to get the 2 points here tonight.
Yeah, I agree. Both of us spent the first part of this segment talking about what a great offensive team this Florida Panthers squad is. So really the great equalizer for that is your goaltender. If he gives you the saves you need. And again, I do think that going into this game and expecting to shut them down is a fool's errand. It's just the era of hockey we're in now. You're more than likely not going to shut a good offensive team down. You just have to minimize them. With that in mind, another way that they have to minimize this Florida Panthers team, this game cannot become a special teams battle because the Florida Panthers sit at 6th in both power play and penalty kill in the National Hockey League. So even if you put aside the Penguins' power play struggles, this is not a team that gives up a lot of power play goals. So if your power play struggles against the Florida Panthers, congratulations, you're part of the NHL. Everybody's power play struggles against them. And they have a very good power play as well. Now, Penguins, pretty good PK, but let's not go touching that hot stove tonight. Stay out of the box. Don't try to put this on your penalty kill, especially with a limited lineup at 11-7. So if you're the Penguins tonight, yes, I want you to get into the quote-unquote fight. I want you to be engaged. I want you to match the physicality, but do not cross that line because you will pay for it.
Agreed. I'll need to see them kind of turn into the late Dan Bilesma era Penguins, where if a team were to just annoy them even a little bit, they would go berserk and take all these dumb penalties, and then, they get scored on just because they lost their cool. I do not want to see that happen tonight. I don't expect it to happen just because we really haven't seen it that often under Mike Sullivan, but this is, especially against a team that has one of the best power plays in the league, that cannot happen. One more thing before we head to break. The playoffs, I know for this team, they started a couple weeks ago. They should have at least, but they are into high gear tonight. It is playoff hockey for this team the rest of the way. I'll keep saying it too. These next 10 games are their season. It's do or die time. If you don't string together some consistent results over these next 10 games, especially as those games in hand continue to dwindle down as you get closer to the same amount of games played with other teams that are ahead of you, you are going to be toast heading into the trade deadline. It has to start tonight. This is so massive. It really doesn't get any bigger than this.
They have to join the party. Every team they're chasing is starting to find a rhythm and starting to put together wins. They have to join the party. And here's the thing I'll say. There will be no excuse, I think, should this team miss the postseason again. But should they find a consistent level of winning down the stretch, we will know that the fault lies with a mid-season lull where they could not put it together. But if they come down the stretch looking good, playing consistently, we can point to, hey, when they had the opportunity, they didn't take it. They were too inconsistent, but a lot of good signs to end the season. Right now, this is where it has to start. Like you said, the games in hand are beginning to dwindle. Like I said, the teams ahead of them have been stringing wins together post All-Star break. So now is the time you have to join them. You have to start putting wins together. You have to start stacking points because in a week or two, all those games in hand are gone. They are out of the question anymore. There is no more, hey, it's not a big deal. They got plenty of games left on the schedule. We're well past the halfway mark of the season. and it's now or never.
Those will all be gone by the time March comes around, because you know how busy the schedule is going to get in March. We've discussed that so many times on the show. It's now or never at this point for this team. So let's see if they answer the bell starting tonight over these next 10 games.
And maybe it's a little bit of hopium, but this team has shown when they play games in short order, they play to use the coaching cliche, they play the right way. It seems like when they get extended breaks, they come out sloppy. They come out playing inconsistently. So maybe, just maybe, and you can cold takes expose me on this, I will fully wear it, but maybe March is just what the doctor ordered for this team, to where they are going to get locked in to a bunch of games in a short period of time, knowing they cannot have any margin for error and they have to stack points and play the right way.
And I know they've lost the 2 games to the Panthers so far this season, but doesn't this scream like a game that the Penguins will be very much up for, considering who they've beaten this season versus who they've lost to? Again, I know they've lost the previous 2 meetings, but this just feels like a game where the Penguins are going to wake up and be like, you know what? We're going to play that boring low event style where we're not going to give you anything, and we're going to go out there and only allow 1 goal, or maybe even get Tristan Jarry another shutout. To me, that's what it feels like a little bit. I could totally get cold takes exposed on that. Please, if I do, you can come clown on me in the YouTube comments or on social media. I totally will wear it, but it feels like a game where the Penguins will truly show up. The one where I feel like they may lay an egg is tomorrow night in Chicago, because the Penguins have really struggled against the Blackhawks over the years. But I think that will do it for this second segment of today's episode. Coming up to end the show, it's Wednesday. You all know what that means. It's Warrior Helmet Wednesday. Pat and I are going to give our Warrior helmet to the player that was the Penguins' best over this last week. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, I know who I'm going to give my Warrior helmet to for this last week, even though the Penguins have been kind of struggling after that win against Winnipeg last week. But who are you giving your Warrior helmet to for this past week?
I'm going to split it this week, just because even though I don't think there are a lot of deserving candidates for the Warrior helmet after those 2 games in Minnesota and Winnipeg, I'm going to give it to both goaltenders, to Tristan Jarry and Alex Nedeljkovic, both of whom did exactly what they are asked to do. Tristan Jarry almost, if not more, against Winnipeg. They put the team in a position to win, and the team itself failed them. .935 for Tristan Jarry against the Winnipeg Jets, 28 saves on 30 shots, or 29 saves on 31 shots. And then the night prior to that, Alex Nedeljkovic, 27 saves on 30 shots for a .900 save percentage. In no world can you blame the 2 losses on goaltending. Both goalies very much did their job, put the Penguins in a position to win, and then the skaters just let them down through those matchups. So for me, it's got to be the goaltenders for the last 2 games. Other than that, I mean, it's really hard to pick anyone, just because even though he wasn't poor, I mean, I think those were 2 down-ish games for Sidney Crosby, despite the season he's having. But overall, got to go with the goalies.
I would agree with you on that. I'm only going to give it to 1 goalie, though, for this past week. I easily could do the split that you are doing, but I'm going to just do a little bit of a change up. I'm going to give my full Warrior helmet to Tristan Jarry. He was fantastic this past week, was amazing in the win against Winnipeg, gets the shutout. And even in the 2-1 loss, he kept the Penguins in that game with a .935 save percentage. And especially in that first period, the Penguins, they came out those first couple minutes, they played, I thought, decently well, but those final 18 minutes of that period, they got dog walked by the Jets. And even though he gave up 2 goals, they weren't his fault at all. It was just textbook, really bad defense. One of them came on an on-man rush. There's really not much Jarry can do there. The other one he had no chance on, but he made 10-bail save after 10-bail save in that first period to give them a chance for the final 40 minutes. And even after Brian Russ scored to cut the lead in half heading into the third, he still continued to make great saves in the third period, one of which was on a breakaway in that one. He is playing at a very high level right now. And as I've said this past week, and as I've said throughout the season, it stinks that the Penguins are wasting arguably his best NHL regular season today. And I know I'm going to say the same thing for how Sidney Crosby is playing this year. Jake Gensel, to a degree, at least a little bit under Evgeny Malkin, but more so I would say Jake and Sid, considering that most nights they're carrying the offense. But the same can be said for defensively at times with Tristan Jarry. He is carrying the load in net. Nedeljkovic has also been great, but Tristan Jarry showing why when he's on, he is one of the best starters in the league. So I'm going to give Jarry my Warrior helmet this week.
Yeah, I mean, essentially it's for me like 75% Tristan Jarry, 25% Alex Nedeljkovic, because like you said, I can't really add any more to that. Jarry in Winnipeg was absolutely incredible, and he continues, despite the loss, to be a thorn in the Winnipeg Jets side. He has consistently throughout his career played well against some very good Winnipeg Jets teams. We kind of forget because they had a year or two lull. Since coming back into the league, the Jets have been a very good team.
I would say that for the most part. I mean, they've made the playoffs most years since going back. I feel like they just haven't had that true, really deep playoff run yet. And it could come this year. I'll say that. They're one of the best teams in the conference. If they're able to fully find the play that they had before the All-Star break, they're going to be a really tough out in the playoffs. I think, potentially even for the Canucks. I think the Canucks are arguably the best team in the West right now, but I think the Jets could potentially take them in that series if Connor Hellebuyck is able to outplay Demko and the Canucks scoring goes down a little bit. But, if you want to learn more about the Winnipeg Jets, you can go follow Harrison on the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. But Pat, unless you have anything else to add for this episode, that will probably do it, but I'll hand the floor over to you.
I do have one thing, and I know you're going to cringe, but I do got to give a shout out to two of our listeners, Hannah and Kelsey. Had a really fun conversation with them over on Twitter today about your favorite thing in the world, and that is the one and only Taylor Swift. So shout out to you two. That was a lot of fun this afternoon. I got a lot of enjoyment out of it. So appreciate you guys for that, and appreciate you guys listening to the show as well. It means the world to the two of us. And that goes for all of you guys out there that listen. Listen to us two chuckleheads talking about the Penguins. It means the world that you guys put your trust in us.
You're lucky I didn't mute your mic for the Taylor Swift shout out, but I'll allow it. I'll allow it just this one. But
appreciate that.
Echo what Pat said. Yeah, we really appreciate everyone listening to / watching this team and just really giving your thoughts on this team, whether it's on social media to us or in the YouTube comments. We appreciate it a whole lot. And you guys are the reason why we do this every day. And yeah, I know this season hasn't gone according to plan. I would feel like, because both of us expected this team to be a lot better than what they've shown so far, but you guys have been there every step of the way. You will continue to watch the team, support our show. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. Let's see if the Penguins can get 2 massive points in the standings tonight, but that will do it for this one. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll be back to recap this game on Thursday and get you all set for the rematch against Chicago from opening night on Thursday night at the United Center. We'll talk to you all on Thursday.